Hi there, I'm Sam Santian, one of your classmates, and a pretty swell guy all around. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Pride and Prejudice. Now, Pride and Prejudice is a very interesting movie, in that it explores themes that we've all seen in many different sources, like PBS, other movies, books, in that everyone involved in this movie is actually a pretty normal person. There's this odd theme where a lot of movies released during this time were done in a way where it seemed gritty and realistic. I think gritty and realistic to me means boring and human. Now when you think about the movie, it kind of has to be based on boring human people. It isn't like there could have been Jar Jar Binks or something popping out, and Pride and Prejudice could have been about aliens and space battles. As I mentioned before, the PBS documentaries and current offerings such as Mr. Selfridge's and Call the Midwife and other things like that are all kind of based around the Pride and Prejudice framework. That is to say, Pride and Prejudice inspired them. They all focus around a main character that is, I wouldn't say trapped, but I'd say they're inconvenienced by their placing in time. Had they been placed several years later, I'm sure that all the different characters in Pride and Prejudice would have had a better time. They wouldn't have had to worry about all the daughters getting married off, because right around this time in history, that's when women started getting their own say. That's why the main girl's having such a hard time when she's talking to everybody, because women didn't really have a say in what they could do. They didn't have a way to talk to everyone. And Mr. Darcy is inconvenienced by his standing in society. Another very common theme is the way that men are supposed to look at women. If you look at any of the modern things, bringing back up Mr. Mr. Selfridge is a very, very innovative man. But we relate to him directly. That's what every man is like nowadays. He walks around, he runs a store, he communicates, he fraternizes even with his store clerks and all of his floor people and all of his different entrepreneurial elements kind of combined into one pretty swell guy. But there are a few times where he has to slip back into the old-fashioned way of doing business. For example, whenever someone goes out and does something that would warrant getting fired, he can't fire someone. He has to kind of keep them on retainer for a little while. And in other cases where he really shouldn't fire someone, say they got caught talking to a person way too long, or, they didn't keep their space as organized as he wanted, he fires them instantly. And that just shows you that this is from a different time, and this is a different type of person that we're dealing with. You can relate to them, but it's also kind of jarring when you see it separated. In the case of Elizabeth, she does kind of show that innovative personality, you could say. It wasn't until the 1930s and 40s that women actually started getting a say in what they could do and what kind of people they could marry even. I guess the best way to put it is, everyone was stuck doing tradition, even if that isn't what they wanted to do, and there was nothing else to stop them. Mr. Darcy, on his side of the story, is a pretty swell guy. He does seem to be a bit... But the one thing you have to remember is, at the time, men were sent off to preparatory schools. This is what they did. This is all that they could do. They had to listen to tradition, they had to listen to what their fathers dictated, they had to listen to honor and integrity and all that. What we considered nowadays to be a bit excessive and a little bit over the top was considered completely normal back then. There was no way they could get away from that kind of male tradition where the men run the household. The only way that Elizabeth can really break free of these societal bounds is if she explores her own femininity and basically breaks free of the mold, which leads to absolutely everyone hating her. See, that's where this little jarring effect that I told you about comes into play. Elizabeth, overall, there's nothing really wrong with her. By all means, she should be mad, and she should keep doing that. That's the kind of mindset that gets the world going. People who don't stick to the mold are the ones who are always the movers and shakers. Who hasn't wanted to move and or shake at some point in their life? It doesn't work out well for Elizabeth, because Darcy does end up sending her that letter that basically tells her, there's a reason that I was being mean about all this stuff, and then Elizabeth goes, oh crap, looks like women are wrong, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should just be stuck with this guy. All she's doing is she's limiting women as a whole, because the more you look into this story, the more the roles kind of flip-flop, and that's the main point I'm trying to make here. Everyone flip-flops so much during this movie. It does prove to be a good foundation for other types of stories, even ones that don't deal with romance at all. They can be based off the Pride and Prejudice skeleton. You're going to run into a lot of different instances where Pride and Prejudice does pop up in modern films and in modern television and modern talk shows even, where they discuss the different themes that are there, because there's basically limitless things to talk about. All the subjects that can be brought up about Pride and Prejudice are all relatively cookie cutter. You can talk about the themes, you can talk about the way that the themes interact with the characters, you can talk about the characters, you can talk about how the themes and characters aside, there's one last thing you can explore about Pride and Prejudice. When Elizabeth and Darcy are introduced to the story, Elizabeth is kind of introduced as this stronger-willed woman from the start. You can tell she isn't like her sisters. She's got her own thing going, her own mojo. But Mr. Darcy shows up kind of as a cookie-cutter gentleman, you know, as a white knight in a world full of black sheep who aren't really doing a whole lot. I mean, the entire family, you know, all of Elizabeth's sisters, they're already at an inconvenience because the way that marriage works is so hierarchical, and there's no way that all of them can get married, and there's no way that they can all carry the honor the same way. There's nothing she can do. Elizabeth gets paired up with Mr. Darcy, but Elizabeth's strong will is keeping her from getting the one thing that she feels like she should want. And Mr. Darcy himself does the same thing. He starts out and says, maybe this girl is different. And then discovers that indeed she is, her circumstances are different, and he says to himself, maybe I should give this woman a chance. Maybe she will be fantastic. And then realizes pretty quickly that she isn't going to fall for his simple charms, and he says, if I really want this woman, I'm going to have to work for it. But his decision that he's going to have to work for it offends her and makes him seem kind of standoffish, just simply because, you know, he's the knight in shining armor. He's supposed to be just good. He's supposed to just kind of be ambient. He's supposed to exist, be a concept. But the fact that he's actually there, it really doesn't bode well for his personal standing, because if he changes it at all, they're going to lose that illusion of someone who's really, you know, the best person for all the sisters to get with. That just shows that everyone's relying on each other's image. Everyone's relying on what should happen. Then everyone explodes and dies.